RB3, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Thank you for joining. Woody, how you doing? DS Comics, how you guys doing? Hopefully everybody's having a good Tuesday so far. The Comcast guy is en route. I told you guys yesterday, made an appointment for them to come out today, so they are supposedly going to be here sometime between 1 and 3, and I didn't want to wait too long and then actually have the guy come right as I was going to go live, so I decided to jump on with the hope that we can do this video before this guy actually shows up. So my thinking is that he's going to show up at like 2:59, you know, which is in time for his 1 to 3 showing. So it'll be interesting when this guy shows up, what he has to say. It's actually supposed to be a supervisor that's going to be coming out. So we'll see whether he brings anything different to the table than the last 2 technicians that have been here. So I did, however, get a $15 credit on my account. Tony Sanders, how you doing, brother? Thank you for joining. Comic Noob, how you doing? Your appointment was Monday, 8 to 12, showed up at 11:45. That sounds about right. So here's the funny thing is they actually called my wife yesterday. I think it was probably about 7:30 or 8 o'clock or something like that. They called her because of a bad survey response that I had given them. And the thing is that the technician that I spoke with on the phone did a fine job, but it asked questions like, what could we do better? You could have more reliable service, you know? I mean, it was like, you're asking me these questions with the hope that I'm going to give you flying colors, and I'm not, right? The technician did a good job, but your service is still not the best. And I'm not going to be shy about saying that. So there are about 6 of you guys here right now, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, Comcast is coming here to the house, so I want to avoid them coming in and interrupting this broadcast. So hopefully DS Comics and RB3 will be able to work out their thing. I think they're working on like a secret project. RB3 did a video the other day and kind of hinted at some things. So I'm waiting for these guys to unveil this secret project so the rest of us can be let in on the magic. So my buddy Tony Sanders, who was actually in the chat, reached out to me, I think it was yesterday, after the live chat that I did, and he brought to me a really cool mystery. And you guys know that I love mysteries, so he brought this mystery to me. It intrigued me. And come to find out, I actually had the book that he was referencing in his direct messages to me. I then reached out to a couple of guys that I know that are pretty knowledgeable about comics, and we went back and forth, and we confirmed that, in fact, what Tony had brought to me is a mystery. The mystery is that there is a popular cover artist out there that has his first published work that you may have in your collection. I know I have 2 copies of the book where his work actually appears. And if you read like the book, there's a book out there about this popular artist. You can look at his Wikipedia page, etc., and they all point to his first published work actually being released in '93. And what we found is a piece of work that was actually released in December of 1992. And based upon everything that we've been able to find, it is in fact his first published work related to comics. The artist actually had some work that was published in Nintendo Power back in '89, but that was unrelated to comics. It was more about a contest that he entered. So call Scooby-Doo to help with the mysteries. No, call Reggie to help with the mysteries because I am a fan. The artist in question is no one other than Jeffrey Scott. Now, when I say that name, you're probably like, who? It's actually J. Scott Campbell. Jeffrey Scott was the name that he used when he first was trying to break into the industry, but he then later changed it to J. Scott Campbell. Come to find out, when I was doing my research, he was actually born in Michigan, some part of Michigan I had never heard of before. He actually has no connection to the state. He actually references Denver as his hometown. So because his family moved from Michigan to Denver because Michigan clearly wasn't cold enough. But I am actually going to release after this live stream a video where I'm actually going to spend more time talking about the background of this whole situation. But I wanted to kind of tee it up in the live stream. One, because I had a little free time. Two, because I really like the live streams. So it sounds like DS Comics also loves a good mystery. He and I have solved a couple of mysteries together. So he knows how much I love this. And hopefully he will hold me true on some of the things that I'm saying in this video and also in the one that I'm going to release soon. But in the video that I will be releasing, I'm actually going to show a couple of the J. Scott Campbell covers that I have. I actually don't have many, but I do have one that is probably pretty high on my list in terms of my most favorite covers. And it is this one that he did for Domino. This is the cover D from the newest Domino series, and it is just a really, really gorgeous cover featuring Domino. I picked this up from J. Scott Campbell's website a few months ago. It of course has his signature down at the bottom and of course his certificate of authenticity on the back. So definitely one of my more favorite covers. So let's go ahead and jump into the reveal here. RB3 is saying that J. Scott Campbell will be there in October. He might get a sketch. Brother, I may come see you and get a sketch along with you because J. Scott Campbell's huge. So his first published work, at least to our understanding, appeared in '93. But as I mentioned, he actually had some work come out in 1992. And it came out in I guess at the time, a well-known book. It was the third issue of Savage Dragon, drawn by the very talented, in my opinion, Erik Larsen. So if you have this book, you want to check it out. And what you want to do is to look at the very last page. There is a letter, the letters page. If you look back here at the back of it, you will actually see a sketch that was done of Savage Dragon. And it's actually dated 10/12/92, and it is signed by Jeffrey Scott. So definitely a very cool piece of artwork embedded into Savage Dragon #3. And like I said, when I release the video a little bit later today, I'm going to spend more time talking about how this may have come to be, how Jeffrey got his start with Homage Studios back in the day and his relationship to Jim Lee. It's actually an interesting one that I had no awareness of, and maybe you guys do, but I actually had no awareness of it at all. So it was a cool mystery that Tony brought to me that I had a lot of fun kind of digging into. It is also Tony's birthday. I'm not sure exactly when it is, but he just gave himself a very wonderful present earlier today. So if you haven't checked out his channel, I encourage you to do so. He's got a lot of really cool books, and he's got a very special book that he gave to himself, I think yesterday. DS Comics, you probably want to check it out. I think you will get a kick out of the gift that Tony bought for himself. So let me get caught up here on the chat real quick, see what everyone's saying. So we've got Miss Hustle in the room. Hey, Miss Hustle, how you doing? Jeffrey, how you doing, bud? You are very welcome, Tony Sanders. So let me check up on this here. Going to cover Erik Larsen tonight. We may have to check that out because Erik Larsen, man, to be honest with you, is one of my favorite artists. I think he did an incredible job when he was working on Spider-Man. And, you know, I was clearly a big fan of Savage Dragon because I have a lot of those early issues of Savage Dragon. And I think his art is pretty darn solid. So if you're going to be doing something on him, I will probably check that out. So I'll have to throw you a subscribe if I don't already so that I can check that out. Hoping to do a video on the Super Patriot. Definitely. Remember, there was a swimsuit thing, Wildcats. Yep. So DS Comics, the way that it worked, and again, I'm going to go into this in more detail in the video, but some of his earliest work that he did for Image that was published in '93 were actually 2 pinups that appeared in that swimsuit issue. And I remember the swimsuit issue. I didn't purchase it, but I remember seeing that book. He had 2 pinups in there, and I was unable to find exactly which pinups because I couldn't find a full copy of the book digitally. But I think the cover artwork was actually done by Jim Lee. There was a couple of pinups by Mark Silvestri. I think there was one by Erik Larsen, and then there were at least 2 in there that were done by by J. Scott Campbell. He also conceived the idea of Gen 13. And he actually did the artwork for Gen 13. And I think it was around issue number 3 that he actually started to co-write the book with a couple of other guys that were working for Homage Studios at the time. So all of that stuff kind of started around 93, and the image that I just showed you actually appeared at the very end of 92. And to my knowledge, again, based upon my research, is the first published work that he actually put together. SWG Goat 99, how you doing? Miss Hustle, we got to get you caught up on Erik Larsen. He is an absolute beast. This is one of his pieces here. This is his cover and his brainchild, Savage Dragon, that he put out with Image back in the day. Definitely a talented guy. And if you search for him on Amazing Spider-Man Erik Larsen, you'll pull up some really cool artwork by him as well. We get caught up. Stumbled across your Super Patron, thought it was a great looking character. Yeah, so I say go for it, Jeffrey. Erik Larsen, ASM 14 cover recreation. Yep, RB3. So Jeffrey's actually going through the history of Erik Larsen, right? Erik Larsen actually took over for Todd McFarlane when Todd McFarlane was leaving, and then I think, or when he stopped working on Amazing Spider-Man, and then they eventually went to work with Image. And I want to say, was it Mark Bagley that took over for Erik Larsen after he stopped working on ASM? I think that's the order. I am a big fan of Mark Bagley's work, big fan. Los, how you doing, brother? Oh, so Erik Larsen is Chief Financial Officer. Is that what you're saying? RB3? All right. So love a good mystery. Can't wait to see your video. Yeah, and DS Comics in the video that I'll be releasing, it's going to go into a little bit more detail. It's still a relatively short video. I think it's only like 8 minutes long. Not as long as some of the other mysteries that we go into, because it was solved relatively quick and it's relatively straightforward, I think. But it's going to go into a little bit more detail. I'm going to show some cool images from some of the early artwork that we're kind of talking about right now. So it should be pretty cool. Woody. Definitely Savage Dragon is cool. There's a couple of other really cool Savage Dragon covers that I have somewhere. See if I can grab them real quick. So what's interesting is that I think I had these books signed by Erik Larsen back in the day. This is issue number 2. I need to actually confirm that. Back when I was younger, I wasn't necessarily the most social. Still not. I'm not really. But I went to a couple of cons, and I think that I actually may have had this one signed by Erik Larsen. You can see, to Jeffrey's point, there is Super Patriot right there in the background. So I have a couple of copies of Savage Dragon number 2. I have a couple of copies of Savage Dragon number 3. This is one of my favorite covers. This is number 1. Just a really, really nice black cover, close-up photo of the man himself, Savage Dragon. Actually, I have 2 really great copies of that. Well, one's a little dinged in the corner. That was one I got as part of a purchase, but my copy from the 90s is actually in pretty solid shape. I have number 6. That's an okay cover. And then number 12. And then number 15, just a couple of cool ones here. I think there may be a few others that as I grabbed them out of the bin, I kind of lost a few of them. But anyway, so Larsen hated Venom and drew him ridiculously, but everyone liked it. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I'd have to go back and look at that. I actually don't know the history, to be honest with you, of Erik Larsen's time with Venom. DS Comics, thank you, brother, for confirming that Mark Bagley did take over for Erik Larsen when he left the title. But I am definitely a big fan of both of those guys. They both draw Spider-Man incredibly well, and as you guys know, that is one of my favorite characters. So let me get caught up here. I have no idea what Savage Dragon is. Yeah. Victor, how you doing, brother? Welcome to the chat here. Gregory, how you doing? Yeah, so there's a couple of really cool covers, I think, from back in the day. You know, I was definitely a fan of the Image work, you know, because who wasn't a fan, to be honest with you, of many of those guys that were actually at Marvel back in the day, right? So you're talking about Jim Lee, arguably one of the most solid artists that there is. definitely a Marvel man. There was Eric Larson, there was Mark Silvestri. I think Mark Silvestri was actually working on Guardians of the Galaxy at the time. And I have a long run of Guardians of the Galaxy. I was a big fan of that title back in the day. But it's like Todd McFarlane, right? You name these guys off, and these guys were the guys at Marvel, and the fact that they decided to actually leave and go do their own thing at Image, they pulled, I think, a lot of readers with them. And I went along for the ride and picked up many of these books. I have an entire box of Image comics. Just about every title that came out, I probably purchased. And I also have another box of Valiant books as well that I went out and picked up. So definitely a fan of these guys, definitely a fan of their artwork. I mean, I still even look at some of Todd McFarlane's videos that he puts up on Instagram now, where he redrew the Venom trailer to match his style, and it was actually, I personally thought he made some solid improvements over what they actually did in the movie by changing the character just a little bit. And I think it was really well done. So get caught up here. Victor saying he has several boxes of Image titles. Yeah, brother, I think we almost all do, but definitely hold on to them, because you never know what is going to happen. So DS Comics is actually making a comment here that I should take a look at some of the first works that were done by artists. So what's interesting is that was the original idea that kind of came out of the back and forth that Tony and I had. We started talking first about J. Scott Campbell and his works. I just happened to have that book, but the conversation then turned to, well, maybe we should look at some of those first work by some of those other artists, like a Jim Lee, like a Todd McFarlane, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, I don't have those books, but I may decide to track them down, because I think that it could make for a very cool series, right? If you think about it, where you could actually tell the story of some of those artists, where they started, right? What that work looked like, and then where they really hit their stride, especially if they're really popular. It might be a really fun kind of series to look at. So maybe I am previewing something that will be coming later on. So Miss Hustle is talking about Bill, and I have no way of pronouncing Bill's last name, but Bill is a cover artist that I think did several things. He recently did a Fantastic Four #1 cover featuring Dr. Doom. He did a limited run. I think it was of 200 or so signed copies for like $50. I almost picked one up. He also did New Mutants 18. It's not really a crisp design. It's kind of not quite abstract, but it's definitely a unique take and a unique style on a character. But Bill has been around for a very long time and has some really awesome artwork. So when they say they started Image, they ended up at Copper Age and started the Modern Age. I think Spawn #1 is what marks the change. Yeah, definitely a good point about that. You know, for the longest time, I couldn't find my Spawn #1. I literally just found it 2 days ago in a box. It wasn't in either one of my Image boxes. It was in another box all by its lonesome, right? So I found 2 through whatever, and the #1 was just kind of floating off in the ether, but thankfully I picked it up and found it. I have a Dazzler cover. Let me get caught up here. Jim Lee posted on Facebook some of his So, Los, I keep meaning to bring that up. And I talked about it yesterday, and I forgot to talk about it then. But I personally think Jim Lee, I've never met the guy, but I feel like I would like him. But what was really humbling, I think yesterday, or 2 days ago, he posted, I saw it on Instagram, he posted all of his rejection letters, or many of his rejection letters from Marvel and DC, where they basically said things like, your artwork isn't ready. It looks like your artwork was drawn by 4 different people. The one on page 4 was possibly the best. You need to learn how to draw hands. Your figures and your characters look very stiff and very fake. You need to study the way that fabric actually folds and the way that light bounces off of metal. Like it was interesting for a lot of different reasons. It was interesting because Marvel and DC, and I think more Marvel than DC, took the time to actually look at his artwork and like give him specific feedback on things that they were seeing that he can improve upon. So oftentimes people give feedback and it's like this generic form letter kind of thing with no specificity that really doesn't help you, you know? It's like when I was bodybuilding, it would say, you know, you need to improve your chest. Okay, well, what does that really mean? Upper chest, lower chest, middle chest, outer chest, inner chest? Like the chest is a big thing, right? But these different people that responded back to Jim Lee gave him some specific things to work on. And then the other part of it is that he was humble enough, and I think maybe has had enough success where he felt like he could put that up without damaging his reputation. And I think what it also did is like serve as a source of inspiration for maybe other young artists out there that are trying to break into the industry. I think that they would probably look at that and say, if Jim Lee was rejected, then and made it, then maybe there's a chance for me. And so I read that. I'm not an artist. I can't even draw to save my life. But I thought it was a really, really wonderful moment by Jim Lee. And it just reaffirms some of my beliefs that he is actually a really good guy. So, Key Comics Collector, how you doing, brother? I am not drinking muscle milk. I drink a lot of coffee and a lot of water. All right, so let me see. Yeah, so Prowler, that's a very good point, what they said about Kirby's artwork, man. I mean, who knows, right? Because he definitely has a unique style all his own. And I know when I first saw his artwork, I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I didn't think that it was good. I think, but with time, I grew to appreciate his artwork for what it was. Very unique, and easily identifiable. Like when you see it, you know that that's Kirby's work. And I watched a documentary recently where someone was saying how with Kirby, he would start drawing something and he would draw like a tree over here, and he would draw a leg here, and he would draw an arm here, and then he would draw a head here, and then he would just keep waving his hands over the paper. And before you know it, this wonderful artwork appeared that was in proportion, but the way that it came out of his head was so disjointed, you wondered how it would ever come together. And so you can just imagine like the pace at which this guy worked, because he drew so many different things, and he didn't just do covers, he did entire books, and he did them really fast. In fact, I was having a debate with someone yesterday about J. Scott Campbell, and it was a question of, you know, do you think that J. Scott Campbell will be regarded long term maybe the same way that Kirby was? And I kind of say that because they're both really talented guys, but J. Scott only does covers, right? Besides like Gen 13, I think he only does covers, whereas Kirby did covers, he did interior panels, and he did lots of books across lots of different titles, created lots of different characters. Again, kind of maybe unlike J. Scott Campbell, who I don't know that he's created all that many characters. So it's just interesting. Just interesting that they are both wonderful and talented artists. It's just, I wonder how they will be regarded long term, you know? DS Comics is saying he thinks Marvel tried to reject McFarlane's webbing, saying his style on ASMs didn't. Yeah. So I think, you know, maybe McFarlane got the short end of the stick in some ways. You know, it's interesting how they tried to prevent him from doing some of the things. I think that, you know, they also complained about his exaggerated poses for Spider-Man. I don't think that they like that, you know, not necessarily realistic in terms of some of the poses. If you even think about some of the covers where, you know, his knees are up by his shoulders, you know, so. Yeah, so a couple of people are making here comments about how Kirby's artwork gets better, right, with time. I think you, in my opinion, right, this is just my opinion based upon my experience, that it takes a little bit of experience to really appreciate just how talented he was and just how wonderful his artwork is. So, Los, thank you for joining, brother. I appreciate it. So, yeah, Kirby, I think, has a style that is very unique and I don't know is easily appreciated by everyone. At least it wasn't by me. But I've learned to appreciate it, which is part of the reason why I went out and bought the Externals. When I found out that he wrote the Externals, he drew the Eternals. I was like, I've got to get that, right? And so, lo and behold, it was actually potentially part of a movie or something that they may do, but I did not purchase it for that reason. I purchased it because I watched a couple of documentaries about Kirby and was like, okay, if this was his brainchild, his baby, right? You know, when he came back to DC after leaving DC, maybe I should pick it up. You know, it's the same reason why to some degree I went out and bought the Mr. A books that were done by Ditko, right? Ditko's brainchild was Mr. A, and this was his baby, his child, where he was unencumbered, right? Much like Todd McFarlane, unencumbered by the company, and he was able to create a character that he wanted to create and give it his own personality, look, and feel. And so that's part of the reason why I picked up Mr. A, which I don't think will potentially be worth any money, but who knows? That's not necessarily why I bought it. So Carl on base 181, how you doing? Yeah, so I'll get everybody caught up here. So we've kind of meandered on topics. I am coming out with a video a little bit later today that will go into more detail about the purpose of this chat. But very quickly, someone, a fan, if you will, of the channel brought a mystery to me because I love mysteries. And the mystery was that a very popular cover artist, J. Scott Campbell, had his first work appear in an issue of Image Comics that is pretty widely unknown. At least that's my belief based upon everything that I've been able to dig up. But J. Scott Campbell, well-known cover artist, super talented guy, had most of his published work is known to have started in '93. With some pinups and with some work on Gen 13. But if you take a look, if you have this copy of Savage Dragon #3, there is actually a sketch that was done by J. Scott Campbell back in 1992 in the very back of this book, and it features Savage Dragon. This was something that he worked on that somehow or another ended up in a publication in '92, and I don't think that it's widely known that this sketch was actually in this book. So there you go. Now you are up to speed, Carlos, and Carl, and anyone else that may have come in a little late. Tony Sanders, who is saying thank you to me right now for the shout out, is actually the person that brought this mystery to me a few days ago, and I thank him for bringing this to me and giving me an opportunity to do this cool video for you guys. If you haven't gone over and checked out Tony's page, I encourage it. He's got some pretty cool videos and just gave himself a wonderful birthday present the other day that I would like to have for myself, even though my birthday isn't going to be until next year now. So Carl on base, you are very welcome, brother. Key Collector Comics, thank you for joining. And if you guys haven't checked out his app, Nick's app is pretty solid. I've done a video on his app in the past. It is a wonderful resource. If you are out hunting books and you can't remember one key from another and the numbers start to blend, I can't tell you how many shops I've been in with the app in one hand and my hand flicking through boxes in the other. So definitely a pretty solid app. So check that out. All right. So are you looking for a particular book that he worked on? No. So someone's asking, no, I'm not really looking for a particular book. For me, I like doing these videos because I like to solve mysteries. There are sometimes unanswered questions that are unanswered because Marvel is inconsistent sometimes in its behavior. Mysterious because people have come to accept it being one way when maybe it should be another way. And some people assume that it's one way without understanding that there's an alternative set of facts that are out there. And so, like, for example, there's one mystery that I may work on around Circe from the Eternals. She has an appearance that is understood to be in one book, but she actually appears in a completely another book. And then if you actually look at CGC says that one book is her first appearance and actually spells her name incorrectly. Those are the kind of mysteries that I like because I just think that they're fun things to kind of dig into. So definitely not looking for anything in particular, just having a little fun with some mysteries that we uncover from time to time. So Whitewell Comics, how you doing, brother? All right, so that is the end of this live stream. I want to thank you guys for joining me. As mentioned, I'm going to be pushing out a video probably in the next 10 minutes or so if I can get it uploaded. It is going to go into a little bit more detail over the J. Scott Campbell first published work being in this Savage Dragon. I'm going to give a little bit of background around where he was published before, etc., etc. So if you have a chance to check that out, I would greatly appreciate it. All right. And as always, I want to thank you guys for joining me, and also want to thank you for any thumbs up that you may leave or any comments that you've made. Take care.